It's great to be here. I will say, other than coming in from Boston yesterday and landing and realizing my allergies had exploded, but that's only because of the beautiful state that this is. I got to drive around with my son's best friend and my closest friend's son, all of which the same person, Matthew Rosen, is here somewhere, and see the state, and it really is extraordinary. Thank you for having me. It's wildly impressive, and I spend a lot of time traveling around the world, wildly impressive to see 800 people at a regional event at 7 o'clock in the morning. Very exciting for me, and to Climate Solutions, congratulations. What we heard from Greg today is impressive and is innovative. Climate Solutions is doing extraordinary work in this part of the world in their efforts to fend off destructive coal use or light a fire for more clean energy and clean transportation, and at the same time creating many, many good-paying jobs. It's also inspiring to see the cast of characters, to see the coalition, to see the collaboration of people in this room and what you're trying to do with Climate Solutions. We have got to make the case. We have got to make the case now and every day, and I'll talk about that a little bit more, that addressing climate solutions, as Morgan Freeman says, it is about building a future. It is about being the generation that destroyed its home or the generation that responded. And anyone who thinks this is still a scientific issue only, an environmental issue only, and not the issue of our times, the issue that will decide whether our children are fighting wars over water and whether our children will have the opportunity to have the earth and the comforts that we have, it will happen if we collectively fight climate change, and it will not happen otherwise. And the myth that this is only about blue states and not red states, and only Democrats should care, and progressives and conservatives care but others don't, and people who live where I live in Brookline, Massachusetts, or where you live in Seattle, Washington, or in Berkeley, California, are really the only ones who care about this. We are looking at our future, and there is no R and no D, and there is no blue state and no red state. There cannot be anyone who doesn't care about their family, their future, and our economy. The very people who somehow are saying climate doesn't exist are people who would throw themselves in front of a bus for their families, for their children. They need to throw themselves in front of a bus for climate change. We need to stop this bus that's growing and moving all too fast. And if I leave you with one thought today, at the end I will come back to this. It is we have to change the debate. We have got to change the message. We have got to change the messengers. We have to stop talking to only people who agree with us and meeting with all of our friends and collaborators and move to the difficult conversations of addressing climate risk from every sector and every perspective. So looking out on this room is nothing but hopeful. It is delightful. It is extraordinary. It is great. Greg talked about what you're doing here. I mean, we always hear on the East Coast, California, the 7th largest economy, they do everything great. Well, they do a lot of things good, although the water crisis that they're living right now is certainly not great. But what you are doing, you are building an effort around the 5th largest economy, not the 7th largest economy. When you put together Oregon, Washington, and California, and British Columbia, what you are doing in trying to have an impact is moving the 5th largest economy of the world. That is crucial. That is impressive. When you're able to get a price on carbon for the 5th largest economy of the world, that's what we call progress. So go for it. Go at it. We're with you. You are doing game-changing work out here, and I will say that's what the work is critical, especially when you look around the world, whether it's in our own state, our own country, in Europe or China. People are looking for leadership. They're looking for real-world solutions, showing that a clean energy future isn't just viable, but showing that clean energy is actually here and what it means. You have models on the ground here that are working. You have policies in play that are replicable, and you're creating good-paying jobs. Ceres and Climate Solutions share the same mission. I want to speed through some of this, so I'm not going to say a lot. But what Ceres does is we're an advocacy organization, and we exist to mobilize businesses and investors, the capital market leaders, to turbocharge sustainability, to price things accordingly. Right now, carbon pollution, which costs society billions and billions of dollars, is priced at zero in most places. Not everywhere. We've got special initiatives in the Northwest and the Northeast, but we've got the wrong systems in place. At Ceres, when investors founded the organization on the heels of the Exxon Valdez spill, it was about bold leadership. It was about valuing our natural resources. It was about realizing the economy cannot move forward if we don't value our resources, conserve our resources, and understand we do not have unlimited resources to grow and to build our country and our world. And to make the case that integrating sustainability into capital markets is a good thing. It is not only about preserving our future and preserving the earth and building a community for our children. It is about building an economy that is about good jobs and clean jobs across the country and across the world. When we launched at the beginning of 2014 our Clean Trillion campaign, which really is an umbrella for what we're all doing today, it is not about Ceres, we had a dual objective: ratcheting down investments in fossil fuels and scaling up investments in clean energy. To limit temperature rise to no more than 2 degrees Celsius and avoid the worst impacts of climate change, the IEA, the International Energy Association, tells us the following: that we need to invest an additional $44 trillion in clean energy by 2050. That's an average of more than an additional $1 trillion per year for the next 35 years. It is daunting, but it is doable. And let me talk about some of the results and the progress we're starting to see, much of it due to the great work you're doing out here, and much of it will come from the great work you're doing moving forward. But first, why am I optimistic? And I will tell you, I do wake up some days after being at this for 37 years feeling great, we're making progress, we're moving forward, let's have at it. Other days, not so much. But by and large, I do think we're making progress, and that's the message that I want to leave you with. Global leaders are starting to embrace more and more every day the urgency for climate change. Let's talk about most notable in that China, the world's largest low-carbon investor by far, which recently joined forces with the United States to make climate change a top national priority, and with that invested $89 billion in clean energy. It is a huge positive development, not only the $89 billion, but the message it sends to Paris. As you all know, next December in Paris, we will have an international gathering of world leaders from nearly every country. That gathering has to see progress, has to make progress, and has to move us forward on climate change. It will not happen without the big players. It will not happen without bold leadership from the United States, and it will not happen without bold leadership from China. So $89 billion, a good start. The goals they're setting and priorities, for sure, helpful. More to do, but we need to see that as a positive sign, which I think in any analysis it is. Second reason for optimism and positive signs: clean energy investments are taking off. $310 billion in investments this year. It's not $1 trillion yet, but we can get to $1 trillion in 2030 if we have $310 billion in investments this year, a 16% increase from 2013. Green bonds, everybody's hearing about green bonds these days. We're pushing banks and investment firms and insurance companies and states to float green bonds, bonds that will fund environmentally sound things, not environmentally damaging things. And they are taking off. To go from $10 billion to $40 billion is only a start. We'll get to $100 billion. And direct and indirect investments, bank commitments, no matter the barometer, clean energy spending is growing in all corners of the world. We are on our way to reaching the clean trillion. We could get there, whether it's venture funds or pension funds, or commercial banks and investment banks. A few months ago, I stood with Michael Corbett, who is the CEO of Citibank. We had worked with them for 3 years on a goal, a program that was clear: commit over the next 10 years to $100 billion in clean energy investments. He stood and talked about that commitment that they made at Citi, $100 billion, and the language was different than even their last announcement 5 years ago about $50 billion. That language wasn't only about clean energy investments and making money, it was about dealing with climate change, with climate risk, which impacts every sector of our economy. And it's not just Citigroup. Bank of America, a $50 billion commitment. Wells Fargo, a West Coast bank, or at least founded out here, $30 billion, and Morgan Stanley, $20 billion. All of these are great starts and great down payments on getting to the clean trillion. And I see nothing but more impact every day. The third reason I'm optimistic, beyond money going into this space and beyond global leaders starting to kick in and make a difference, is solar power and other clean energy technologies are taking hold. The result of plummeting production costs and growing recognition in the business community that renewable energy is a safer, long-term energy strategy than investing in fossil fuels, period. If you're in oil now, $50 per gallon perhaps isn't your greatest investment. If you're in coal, I have no other analysis than it seems to be a dog as an investment. We are seeing more and more money going into clean power, and that's great. Literally two-thirds of the Fortune 100 companies have specific goals for renewable energy sourcing, energy efficiency, and greenhouse gas reductions. And in pursuing each of these goals, they're saving billions of dollars and eliminating the need for dozens of coal-fired power plants. These companies see technology as their future, and the movement is swift in almost every sector. It is happening, and it is moving. A fourth reason for optimism is businesses are seeing the need to integrate sustainability into what they do, their business plans from the boardroom to the supply chain. You just have to look as far as California. No business, no community, no human being, no person can deal without water. We are seeing fights over water that will only grow. McKinsey tells us that we have 40% less water and will have by 2030 if we don't change everything about how we're using water. But we're starting to look at how to integrate water, how to integrate climate risk into our capital markets. We have a very long way to go, but the subject has been broached. It is no longer a foreign language. We are seeing change, and it is moving. Another reason for optimism is domestic policies are headed in the right direction. Sometimes it doesn't look that way. I live in the same real world in the politics that you live in. Washington is divisive as anything I've seen in the 35 years I've been in this space, and I don't have an easy way to get us out of it, although we'll talk about that a little bit. But we are seeing changes, nevertheless, in national policies, state policies, and regional policies, and we need to keep pushing for them. And I will tell you, the best voice for doing so is your voices. Whether it is the 25 or so clean power energy standards in states, or it's EPA standards calling for fuel economy where we have 55 miles per gallon rather than 27 miles per gallon as the law of the land. Those are good changes, and we will see more, but we got to keep pushing. I already hear that there's movement to roll back the fuel economy standards. We got to 55 miles per gallon. It is our turn to make sure those do not get rolled back, despite the fact we're at the interim period. Now is the time Congress and the regulators reevaluate. I've been part of those reevaluations as a regulator when I was EPA regional administrator. That's when the pressure comes. We need to be equally vigilant to put the pressure on to make sure we keep those fuel economy standards in place and that 55 miles per gallon is the norm and not 27 miles per gallon. So we're seeing hope from policy to regions to other countries. Hope is there. The clean energy economy is growing, but a sobering statistic before I go into 3 or 4 things that we need to do and then let you go off to your days. It is true, and I'm not here to tell us the sad story, but global carbon pollution and global temperatures are still rising. Every day we're seeing and we're feeling the impacts, whether in California's horrific drought, which is being exacerbated by hotter temperatures, or the millions of acres of Northwest timber being ravaged by pine bark beetle and wildfire, or the warming glaciers, and rivers that are undermining recreational areas and parks, and the jobs that come from all of those things. To be sure we are making progress, we are moving on coal. Fossil fuel investments are going down. But we need to move faster, we need to change the debate, and we need to change the debaters. So let me leave you with 3 or 4 things that we all need to be doing, and then let you go off to your day. I mentioned it before, but I cannot say emphatically enough that we need to change the message and the messengers. This is no longer an environmental issue. This is no longer a scientific issue. This is the issue of our future. It was so beautifully said by Morgan Freeman in that video that we just saw. We have got to find a way to make the case. If economics is the argument, let's make the economic arguments. If humanity is the argument, which of course is what drives all of us and should be the bottom line, we'll make the humanity arguments. But this is the issue of our day, of our time, and every one of us, business leaders, investors, community groups, religious leaders, scientists, public health experts, we all need to be part of this effort. We need to get it out of what people consider the ghetto of environmentalism, not a term I like, having run environmental groups or being an environmental regulator for much of my life. But this is everybody's issue. We've got to talk to people differently. We have to make the case, and we have to make it happen now. You know, 2 poignant symbolic things, and symbolism isn't going to get us where we need to go, but it is the start. As a nice Jewish girl, or at least I think I'm nice, but at least a Jewish girl from New York, I said at a dinner party this summer, I thought the Pope coming out on climate change was one of the most profound, compelling, important things that we were going to see. And I still believe it. We need voices like that. He is reaching out well beyond his speech, well beyond what he does in Rome, to reach people around the world, to make the case. This is about what religion stands for. It is about being able to build a world for our future. That kind of symbolism, and more than symbolism, action and intense action, is a wonderful sign of things to come. Another one, a little bit less poignant, but on Earth Day I stood not on the Mall in Washington, where I've been for 35 or so years, some years picketing, some years threatening to be arrested, some years speaking out with colleagues and friends, but I stood at the New York Stock Exchange and rang the opening bell. It was a moment of capitalism getting it, that Earth Day is about the New York Stock Exchange, and that they need to address, every company listed on that exchange needs to address sustainability and climate change. So the signs are there. We're going in the right direction, from companies and investors who need to speak up. I mean, my spending most of my time in that community and in corporate boardrooms and elsewhere is not necessarily because I'm a businesswoman. In fact, I've spent 35 years as an environmental lawyer and regulator and advocate. But business is being heard. Money talks, we like it, we don't like it, it's irrelevant. We want to build an economy that is about our future. And so for the business people in this room, your voices are being heard very differently. When we are up on Capitol Hill with our closest friends from the advocacy community, we are not being heard. When we are up on Capitol Hill with our business partners, whether it's Nike or Deutsche Bank, or any of the people in this room, we are being heard loud and clear. When businesses call members of Congress and say, I am locating a facility in your state because of the laws on clean energy, and that's why I'm here, and I want you to continue supporting that. Those are the voices that are being heard. So we've got to make sure, and we're working to do that through our climate declaration and other things, that businesses change their practices, invest in clean energy, commit to reducing their carbon footprint, and support specific policies. As much as we think we could solve this problem on one-offs, China doing this, 27 companies doing that, we need policy that applies to everybody. We need a price on carbon. We need a level playing field, and we're going to get that and can get that with the voice of economic leaders. We were in Washington last week on a lobby day with 20 or so large companies, meeting with a very different cast of characters, not the most progressive Democrats who we all know and love and have partnered with, but very conservative, Republicans and Democrats alike, from states very different than my hometown of Boston, Massachusetts, or Seattle, Washington. And I will tell you, they are starting to listen. It's not going to be easy. I know the divisiveness. It is insidious. But I would say over the next 4 years, we'll have this debate again. And the time to start that debate is now. We need to bring the best voices into the political debate, and it has to happen. For those who are impacting political campaigns, not the work we're doing, but crucial piece of the overall effort. And investors need to be bought in. They need to stop investing in fossil fuels and start investing in renewable energy. We talked about it. We're seeing more of that. The world's largest investors are evaluating climate risk in their portfolios and making very smart decisions, some of them divesting, some not. For those who are not, they're engaging with the companies in their portfolios. They are the owners of those companies. And they are saying to those companies, we want you to look at your energy mix and change the way you're doing business. So don't forget the investors. Think about the two treasurers. Our investor network on climate risk, which is 110 investors whose assets total $13 trillion. They include your treasurers, the treasurer of Seattle, and the treasurer of Washington, and the treasurer of Oregon. Investors are speaking. They are saying we need to act, and we need to act now. Third, I mentioned at the outset, we need to keep accelerating state and regional climate leadership, and we need to accelerate it. What you're doing here is remarkable, and believe it or not, it is happening in Kansas, in Minnesota, in North Carolina, and a dozen other states that are trying to grow their renewable energy policies. Despite cynical political attacks, they are moving and they are remarkable. And the same for the Northeast states and their unwavering commitment in implementing the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which has yielded enormous energy efficiency and clean energy gains. These efforts are showing the way. They're having an impact. We can move national policy if we continue to build regional policies, which is why I'm so glad to stand before you today and announce our support, the support of the companies in BICEP, Businesses for Innovative Climate and Energy Policy, to support the extraordinary work that you are doing here in Washington and Oregon, and to support your Alliance for Jobs and Clean Energy and Renew Oregon. We're here behind you. The companies from around the country see it as innovative. They see it as the lightning rod they need, and they see what you're doing as the impressive work that they want to support. So thank you for your efforts. And lastly, as I said, we cannot give up on Washington. It is not going to change overnight. We are not going to have a climate policy a week from Wednesday, or probably a year from Wednesday. But we need to start that debate quietly. It's not all about campaigns. We could beat up candidates and go after this person. We also need to have quiet, productive conversations starting now, with business leaders going to members of Congress as we did last week. I will tell you they are being heard. It will not happen overnight, but without policy, without the changes that we need at the federal and, frankly, the international level, we can't get a handle on this. With the changes we're building together, with the people in this room, with the collaborations in the coalition, and with a little help from the Pope, I actually remain highly optimistic that we're going to get there. We have no choice, as Morgan Freeman said. We've got to build the clean energy future. We've got to take it out of the fact that it's trendy, it's environmentalism, it's Birkenstock sandals. It is our economy. It is the real economy. It is about jobs and being able to have families that could survive on good-paying jobs. We're doing a lot. You're doing a lot. But in closing, I need to ask you to double down, triple down, quadruple down. This is our time. We can make a difference. We can hold on to the policies we have. We can support the EPA that is trying to regulate present power plants. The opposition to that is fierce. We were told we couldn't get 20 companies to stand up and support the EPA. I mean, somehow the EPA has become the demon, despite the fact that this is the very agency that makes sure our children have clean air and clean water. How that became a partisan issue, how that became a divisive issue, we need clean air and clean water. I know of nobody who would differ. But we have got to make sure that the EPA get support for the regulations they're putting in place. We were challenged. People said we couldn't get 20 companies to support the regulations. Supporting the EPA was death, they told us. We have 200 companies standing and supporting the EPA. That's a start. It's a start, but so much more to do. I came in here hopeful. I'm hopeful almost most days when I see the changes, and I leave here even more hopeful to have 800 people like you sitting in a room from all walks, committed to building a future where you could raise a family, who could survive healthy, safe, in an economy that works for all of us, is all of our dream. You give me hope. Thank you very much. Have a good day.